We have a lot of generalists nowadays.
Mm,
And I went to the
mm.
butcher the other day, and I don't eat a lot of meat, and I needed a piece of meat. And there's 10 people before me, and there were six guys that happened to be all male butchers, and they were all in conversation with guests, and we're talking about the piece of meat and recipes, and then everybody who left got a piece of sausage, which is
Mm.
something very nostalgic, but that's what we got at the butcher when there were only butchers when I grew up.
Welcome to Behind the Stays, a podcast that shares the stories behind your favorite boutique hotels, short-term rentals, and hospitality brands, and the hosts, operators, and entrepreneurs who've brought them to life. Every Tuesday and Friday, you'll meet the military veterans, the retired flight attendants, the tech entrepreneurs, the school teachers, the single moms, the hoteliers, and real estate investors who are all, in their own unique ways, shaping the future of travel and hospitality. Discover how these visionaries from all over the world have built stunning landscape hotels in the mountains, designed bohemian bungalows on the beach, erected eclectic, off-grid, nature-immersed escapes, and so much more. Behind the Stays is brought to you by Journey, a first-of-its-kind loyalty program that brings together an alliance of the world's top independently owned and operated stays and allows travelers to earn points and perks on boutique hotels, vacation rentals, tree houses, ski chalets, glamping experiences, and so much more. And I'm your host, Zach Boozy-Cruz, head of the Journey Alliance. All right, friends, without further ado, enjoy the show. If you've ever dreamed of owning a hotel, well, this episode is for you. Edwin Kramer, a global luxury hospitality expert with 3 decades of experience at brands like Edition, Nobu, and Four Seasons, joins us to discuss the evolving definition of luxury, the art of hospitality, and why more people should own hotels. Known for his mantra, "Life is short, own a hotel," Edwin now helps entrepreneurs and investors develop, launch, and scale boutique hospitality ventures through his consultancy, Kramer Hospitality. In this episode, we explore why hospitality is attracting more entrepreneurs than ever before, why the future of luxury is experience-driven, personalized, and community-focused, lessons that he learned while working with Ian Schrager, Marriott, and Nobu, the biggest mistakes first-time hotel owners make, where the market is ripe for disruption from boutique concepts to membership-driven hospitality, and why the best hotels feel like a return, not just a stay. Edwin also shares insights into strategies for securing investment, spotting the next great hotel opportunity, and avoiding costly pitfalls when developing a hospitality brand. Whether you're building a micro-resort, reimagining a historic inn, or simply passionate about the art of world-class hospitality, this episode is packed with game-changing insights from a true industry master. All right, friends, without further ado, get ready to meet Edwin. All right, Edwin, we are live. Good sir. Welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you very much, Zach. Really good to be here.
So I have so many questions for you, Edwin, and I've actually been following you on LinkedIn for a while now, and you're the guy, right? For folks who are listening to this that are active on LinkedIn like we are, you're the guy that's telling everyone like why they should own a hotel all the time. Like that's one of your like recurring like LinkedIn posts of like life is short, right? Own a hotel. Talk to us just as we get started here. Like, where did that come from? Like, why is that like a mantra of yours?
So yeah, life is short. Own a hotel really came from decades of having worked in this business and moving from company to company, and then being reminded by people very close to me that I had dreams, and that at some point I had said in my 30s, in my 40s, I'm 55 now, that I've always said the ultimate dream is to have an own hotel. And I realize, as life goes on, life is short, right?
Mm,
And I don't get those years back. And I've had an incredible career, but maybe it is time now to do something on my own. On the flip side, I've also realized there are a lot of people like me. There are a lot of people who are investors, who are perhaps bored of the real estate they're in, of office buildings, because there's so many office buildings you can build, and you can't really show them off to your friends. But hotels are, a great piece. It's a great asset to show off, no, to people, and actually something you can use. A parking garage you can use, but in a very different way from a hotel. So there's a lot of people with dreams, and a lot of people who keep those dreams, I think, on a shelf. But there's also a lot of hoteliers,
mm,
who people who, like me, have worked in this business and have always said, I should do one on my own. And there's always excuses, right? And I just come to the realization in past years that there's much more access and easy access to money. You don't need to be a millionaire to open a hotel.
Yeah.
You got to have a great idea. And I see a lot of people with lots and lots of experience having these desires. So I thought, if I can turn 3 decades of luxury global hospitality into assisting others, supporting aspiring hoteliers, aspiring investors of hotels in their journey, in their development of a concept, of a brand, of a building, and take the years of mistakes I made, the years of mistakes I've seen, all the gadgets, the tricks, the incredible processes that save time, that save lots of money. If I can bring that into a process for owners that could be from a couple of hours of advisory, right? Because I've spoken to lots of people who I think investors who have an idea, but are really trying to copy something else. So sometimes it's really great to have a hotel professional to have a
Yeah.
conversation with you. To people who have a dream of owning a set of a collection of hotels. So that's really where that came from. So it's a bit dual.
I absolutely love it. And I actually want to get your thoughts on this in a minute, right? Around sort of this desire that I don't know if I'm just more in tune to the conversation now, or if it's actually sort of this movement or trend, if you will, that's underway, which is, I think, this desire from people from all walks of business life, like wanting to get into hospitality in some way, shape, or form. Like they have a success building a tech company and they make a little bit of money, and then they want to invest that in not just kind of single family homes in suburban America, but to your point, a boutique hotel in the city, or a rural micro resort somewhere, right? There does seem to be this desire from people who have no right, so to speak, to be in hospitality, to kind of want to get into it. And that does seem to be something that is increasing, even if you just look at sort of like the sheer number of boutiques that are popping up, the sheer number of boutique
Yeah.
operators that there are today, right? Is that something that has always kind of been the case, or from your perspective, is this actually a trend that we're seeing right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we travel a lot more, we see a lot more, we stay a lot more in places. We often think, and there's pitfalls there. We often think we can do better, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's huge lessons to be learned. So sometimes ego comes into play, but they're also great investments. I mean, travel and hotels are, I don't really know any company that isn't growing. People are adding to their portfolio. We have more time to travel with AI taking over. We're going to have more spending, more time to experience big parts of the world we already have with the increase of airlines. So I think it's a really great investment, and I think also a big passion project for people. Now,
Mm,
in our business, it could also be the downfall, right?
yeah,
Everybody always
yeah.
has an opinion, and I said this to somebody recently. I've been going to the dentist twice a year for my entire life, but I can't fill your cavity. But that 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 kind of a reasoning is sometimes used in hospitality, where I've stayed in lots and lots of hotels. I can now own one and open one, and there are the great stories of people who have no experience, who are doing a one-off, and sometimes doing multiple, right? Because getting one right isn't the most complicated. I think it's replicating what you do and doing that on a scale that's sometimes more difficult. But there's great success stories out there, and I think if people have a drive and a passion to do this, surround yourself with great people. Whether that's for some advice or somebody on your board. And I was recently asked to get on an advisory board of an entrepreneur who really wants to develop his own concept. He knows what he wants, but he needs feedback. Surround yourself with some good people, and then this business is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's 24/7. I think that's
Yeah.
where sometimes people forget, right? There's no
Yeah.
such thing as building a building and then having it as a it's never finished. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
24/7 and it's ongoing.
I want to hear a little bit about your career today because you've worked with some of the most incredible brands in luxury hospitality. You were just telling me that you helped open the Edition in Barcelona. You've worked at Nobu. You've had these incredible experiences with some of the brands that I respect the most, and I think a lot of our listeners kind of respect the most. I'd love your sort of take on how different luxury hospitality brands, specifically luxury hotel brands, how they think differently about guest experience, if at all, right? Because, hopefully you go to these properties and you have an incredible experience. I shared recently with you and your former colleague, Dan Flannery, who also was at Marriott for a long time and helped launch Edition. I had the privilege of staying at the Singapore Edition, and it was like one of the most incredible places, if not like the most incredible hotel, uh, from soup to nuts, right?
Yeah.
That I had stayed in. But you stay at enough incredible properties, and it does feel like there's this just remarkable caliber that you hit, and it can be hard in the moment, at least, especially if you're only there for a night or two, to really distinguish kind of the differences in approach or style. I'd love your take on how do different luxury hotel brands think about guests and really the guest experience. Any sort of like obvious or even like intentional differences that you've seen someone like a Nobu take versus an Edition?
I think with Nobu and in addition, I think there's a lot of similarities when it comes to delivery of service.
Mm,
They like to fall, they often fall under the luxury lifestyle category. And I think these categories, they're not always as black and white as we think they are.
yeah.
But I think from a delivery point of view, it really comes down to who is executing and who's managing all your service, right? And you can have a great idea, you can have a fantastic concept. When your team is not delivering, when people are not buying into it, and that staffing model is becoming more and more difficult. But when people are not really living what you want them to execute, then you can do and say whatever you want, but then you're just not in control. So I think culture is a giant driver of how a brand succeeds.
Mm,
And Dan on your podcast explained that really well on what Schrager back in the days wanted. Right, he wanted that sparkle in the eye that the Ritz Carlton people had, and I think that's what we did also in addition. Really, people getting to believe in the brand, and it was the same thing in Nobu. I think Four Seasons at my time, and it's been a while when I was there, they were very standard driven.
mm,
And I don't mean that the other companies not standard driven. I just mean it in the quantity of standards. So there was a big playbook at the time, and I know they've come around too because the world's changed. But there was a big playbook of what you needed to say, what you needed to do, what happens in this situation, what happens in that situation. which works really well if you want consistency.
Yeah.
I think it works really well if you always know what you're going to get. But I think with the times that have changed, it no longer is, I think, a genuine interaction between staff and guests. I think
Yeah.
there's a crucial difference there. And where I've come from, even when I was at Four Seasons, sorry guys, but was that I didn't really go along with you have to say this when this situation happens, or you have to say that when that situation happens. I'll give you an example. I opened the Four Seasons in Damascus back in 2005. Um, a hotel that was going to cater 95% for the local market, Arab speaking market.
Okay.
Hired this incredible team. We're the first hotel to open in 20 years. The entire city at that time driven by a male workforce. So I said, I'm not going to do this. I need to hire a female workforce too. I had conversations with mothers, explaining to them what their daughters were going to do, gave them different job titles, so it was okay for the family to accept that. And I got an incredible, positive, very proud team. And in comes a training team, which was very normal when you opened a new hotel. And at
Okay.
that time, there was a sentence which made a lot of sense. And I think the sentence still used. And it was a very clever sentence Four Seasons used at the end of a service transaction. So at the end of when you put your plate down, or when you gave them somebody to bill, the sentence was, is there anything else I can get for you?
Mm.
Beautiful, right? Because it opened up all kinds of different angles for people to respond, instead of saying, did you like your food? Which is normally
Yeah.
a bit of a downer.
Yeah.
This sentence was so difficult for my team to pronounce that within 1 week time, this team went from super confident to, I have to focus on the sentence, I have to focus on the sentence, and I can't get it out. And we went, through drilling exercises. And I knew that once we were open, 95% of our guests were going to be Arab speaking.
Mm.
So that was one lesson in my life at a very early age, where I said, I will never from here on tell people what to say. I'll train them in what to
Mm.
do. I'll
Mm.
never tell them what to say. And
Mm.
that was my driver afterwards for Campbell Gray. It was the driver in general for what we did at Edition. It was really taking, wonderful, magical human beings, hiring for them who they are, and then training them, but telling them, now go free and be you.
Yeah.
So I think the service delivery, and I think Four Seasons might have changed since then, since those days, because it's a much more a company with the times, obviously.
Yeah.
Back in those times, and times have changed, luxury has changed, but I think from a service delivery, there's a difference there.
Yeah. I want to lean into this idea of luxury changing, because it's something that we've talked about a lot on this podcast with folks who've come on. But you have this kind of unique vantage point, having worked with some of these incredible brands,
Excuse me.
and not just one, right? But a myriad of luxury hotel brands. And I think that there is sort of this debate, right, underway of, you take a brand like the Four Seasons, and the Four Seasons guests of today, right? How different really are they from the Four Season guests 2 decades ago, or 3 decades ago, right? And what I mean by that specifically is it true that like luxury expectations and desires have actually changed? Or is it really true that you just get to a certain age and you want
Mm,
what your parents wanted, what your grandparents wanted, right? When they visited these luxury hotels, because you do walk into some of these brands. And it was actually interesting in Singapore. We actually, my business partner and I, we walked in, we had a drink at the Four Seasons, which was like right down the street from the Edition, and there was this kind of like stark contrast, quite frankly, between sort of how Four Seasons modeled like luxury, and to your point, the level of service, the attention to detail. It was a little more like white tableclothy, right? Than the Edition in every sense of that expression. And it did kind of feel like this stark contrast. Now, granted, they are separate brands, and I don't want to compare them too much here, but I'd love your take on, has luxury like really changed, really evolved when you take a luxury lifestyle brand like Edition, which is a newer brand, right? It competed with the the likes of Ritz Carlton within the Marriott portfolio. talk to us just about observations you have on sort of like the new luxury versus the traditional luxury, and whether there really is sort of a chasm with respect to difference in desires and
Yeah.
expectations.
I think luxury has become a very personal feeling, right? So, what is luxury to one might not be luxury to another. Also, what
Yeah.
is luxury today, for my experience, might not be a luxury experience for me tomorrow. And I think
Mm.
there's a market for lots. Has luxury changed? Sure, and I think you must have heard this many times. But post the banking crisis, you no longer could show off, right? Bigger wasn't always better. Gold didn't work anymore, so it became much more intuitive. I think there's been a big change in now what luxury is post COVID. Right, we
Mm.
were searching for very different experiences. We wanted to be connected. We wanted to be out in nature. I think there's some really interesting things happening in the world right now with luxury when it comes to size of where you're staying, your physical place to stay. I mean, a luxury guest tends to have a pretty decent sized home.
Mm.
And what's
Mm.
happening? We lock ourselves up in tiny houses and call them great luxury experiences. Where did that come from? That's like going back to being in a camper van or in a caravan or in a tent when you were a child, and that was a real luxury experience for people at the time. I grew up on French campgrounds in summers. That was luxury, right? And you were out in nature, you got to play, and then I went to back to a normal home. So I think, yeah, luxury has changed, but I think it's become much more emotional.
Mm.
I When I opened the Barcelona edition back in 2018, it was a rough year. It was a lot of work. We were delayed, and I needed a break. And I went into a small resort in the Atlas Mountains in Morocco on my own and said, I'm going 13 days because it advertised silent walks. There was yoga in the morning, there was breath work in the morning. And I thought, what, that's it. Didn't really look at much of the pictures, got it recommended by somebody. The resort itself, I mean, the bathroom shower leaked, the bed wasn't most phenomenal quality, but I'll never forget how that made me feel. Because that was one of my, what I would say, a truly luxury experience. I woke up in the morning and I walked up the stairs towards a yoga class, a morning yoga class or a breathwork class. And halfway up the stairs, they'd heard me walking up. And this wasn't, 2, 3 rooms. I think there must have been about 15 rooms. They'd heard me walk up and had a glass of hot water with lemon juice ready because I asked them that.
Wow. Wow.
I went up, did my class, walked back down. They heard me. And nobody's watching. It wasn't a creep factor. It was just the way they were positioned, the way the resort was laid out. And they said, when you're done with showering, what do you want to have for breakfast? I went for
Mm.
a shower, came back and my breakfast was there. That to me was such an incredibly luxury experience because it was very personalized, right? That did it for me. Now that may not have been what you wanted. You may have looked for a fantastic bed or an incredible surrounding or a bar with late night things. But maybe we want both. Maybe
Yeah.
on my next trip, that's also what I wanted. So I think luxury was very defined in sort of a box of what it was and what it should be. I think luxury has now become something much more open, something that touches your heart, something that touches emotions, which also means it's much more difficult to get right, right? Because
Yeah.
what might work
Yeah.
for you might not work for me. And I think in that sense, also the world's also changed. I remember going to New York in the 90s and walking through the streets, I had this deja vu feeling. I said, it's like I've been here.
Huh.
Why was that? Because I'd been in New York in lots of movies. The first
Mm.
time I drove up to LAX when I lived in California, and I'm European, so this was very new to me. The entire United States was new to me in the 90s. When I drove up to LAX, I said, I've been here before. Because that drive, I'd been in cars with actors driving up to LAX.
Yeah.
But when I went to Thailand and when I went to Bali in the 90s, everything was brand new to me. I didn't know what it looked like. Maybe I'd seen a picture in a picture book, but it was certainly not in Hollywood movies. There was no internet. Um, it was all brand new, right? The smells, the sounds, the visuals, what the experience was supposed to be like. And I think that's been a big change and a big challenge, I think, for where hoteliers and hospitality developers need to bring their properties, is to say we've experienced so much already before we get somewhere. I'm like, I've
Mm.
checked in personally to every single suite in the Maldives, and I've never been to the Maldives, right? Just through social media.
Mm.
I've stayed on every beach in the Philippines, and I've never been to the Philippines. So,
Mm.
how do we still take um, a demanding guest who's traveled and surprise them? How do we still make that a luxury experience when we've already seen so much, when
Mm.
we've consumed so much of what's out there already? And that's tough, right? Because you can have great ideas, but by the time half of your audience gets there, they've already seen it.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
surprise element's gone, which puts much bigger pressure, I think, on concept development.
Yeah. Oh, so well said. And I couldn't agree more. One of the things I was thinking as you were talking, Edwin, too, is also this thing that at least I feel to be true when I travel, which is a desire to kind of be the ideal version of yourself, right? And sort of some aspect of like aspiration. So when you go and you were talking about the retreat in Morocco, right? You go to these experiences in part because you need a break, right? You need rest. But when you're doing yoga in the morning, it's probably because you want to be doing yoga in the morning. You don't always get to do yoga in the morning at home, but like the best version of yourself, right, is one that starts with lemon water and yoga in the morning. And so I think that there's this interesting tension, right, between the personalization of like, hey, at home you eat eggs. Like if it's personalized and just personalized, like the hotel should just bring you eggs in the morning because that's what you eat at home, right? But the nuance here is actually that you might be striving to, I don't know, like maybe you're interested in exploring being vegan or something like that. So like you might have these aspects of yourself that you bring to you
Completely
in an escape, right? Where it's like, no, I don't want it personalized like I do at home. Not that kind of personalization. I want
correct. Correct.
aspirational personalization, so to speak, right? And that
Absolutely.
tension, I think, is where you win today. It's so hard to execute, but I think that that's where magic happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that point, and my time in Ibiza was very much like that. Ibiza, the island of connection and grounding, and
Yeah.
vegan restaurants. Not very many, and the ones that are there are not very successful. And what I saw in Nobu, in particular, also because of our location, that I had all these fantastic human beings who at home did exactly what you did, healthy breakfast. They went to Soul Cycle, did their classes in the week, and booked the hotel because we had them, but then nobody showed up because luxury for them was 4 days of party, big old tomahawk steak, a good
Yep.
cocktail, and time by the pool. Repeat the
Yep.
next day, and a bottle of
Yep.
champagne
Yep.
on Tuesday because that's also okay. And then you went back home, and then that was your experience again. So you're absolutely right. It really is also depending on where you are, and we used to have decades ago. We used to have one large vacation, and that you chose a location, and that was it. Now we travel so much for work, for even just to be somewhere and work from a place that. What you experience, all those experiences have a complete different meaning at different times of the year.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I want your thoughts, given your expertise in working for these luxury brands. Now, in the consulting work that you do, you're actively helping people buy hotels and thinking about launching concepts of your own. Where do you see opportunity right now, right? If you're talking to a young entrepreneur who wants to go and build their own hotel brand, where's their white space? Where might be an opportunity to differentiate from what the big brands are doing? Is there any sort of like untapped segment or section or sort of category that you think is sort of like ripe for disruption? And if so, what is that category?
Well, I mean, that's the million dollar question. If I had the answer, then we'd all jump on it. No, I think there's very few real innovators at the moment. There's a few who I think do really well. I think some of the mystique of hospitality is gone. I think there's an opportunity to bring that back, but what that is, needs to be defined. But I think it's also a sense of what's happening in the world at the moment. Post-COVID, we looked for nature, then we looked for connection, we looked for community. I think the new generation is looking for community and a sense of connection in their lives in general. But there's very few people who really get that community bit correct, because that's a lot of work, right? And it's relentlessly driven. I think there's opportunity for the membership clubs, or the feeling of being in a membership club. So not necessarily having to buy a membership into something, but a feeling for it. And I think there's also an opportunity if a brand would come to market and they want to scale, to work with one investor, right? Because we have, and I explain that because we've done brands really well in the past decades. The thinkers of the brands want to have it executed. Then you need to find the right people who execute it, right? That's already a big task. But then the owners of the assets, the owners of the building, are within one brand, sometimes 10, 15 different funds. So if you are an executor or you're a developer of a brand, and you have to explain yourself to 10 different parties to see if you can keep that brand connected, that's a tough job. Because if you're an investment company and you own a Marriott, a Hyatt, a Four Seasons, and a Holiday Inn, your intentions with these properties may be very different, but in the end, you want to make money. But if none of them are passion projects, and I don't say investors need to jump into passion projects, because in the end, it's a money-making business. But there is some truth in it to say, do you take pride as one investment company to create 10, 15 properties with somebody, so that you can talk one message, and what you do in one property, you can then execute somewhere else. You can learn from each other. You can teach your asset managers, which have become somewhat of a disruptor, I think, for a lot of general managers, a lot of hotels, right? People who have been put into roles they may not necessarily have massive affinity with, and when it becomes a short-term game in terms of earnings, then are you able to work with that entire team, which always has to include that investor? Are you there to work on a long-term plan? Right? If you have no exit strategy to sell your company in 5 years, then we shouldn't be thinking of short-term gains and short-term goals. We should be thinking really of mid to long-term, because then you can keep positioning your property to a next level, right? You can take properties from 500 to 1,000 euros rate, or whatever market you're in. But I think there's a huge opportunity, if I were to think of brands developing, is to say work with a set team, but make that also to include a specific investor or investment fund, and a specific asset manager or a set of asset managers. So you don't constantly have to explain your actions, and you have a bit of freedom to really grow that brand. I think there's a huge opportunity there. And then for the rest, we're just going to have to see what the world's going to do. I mean, if nature was the post-COVID escape, in some parts, right now with what's happening in the world, I don't know. Are we wanting to go disconnect very, very shortly? I love the word YOMO that came out the other day, the joy of missing out instead of the fear of missing out. Really the disconnect from all the news that's happening, on your side of the pond and our side of the pond, how that's connected. It's not becoming a much easier world to live in, I think. So, somebody who's going to jump into that, but also jump into the zeitgeist of what's going to happen next. We may all be looking for properties that offer us safety. I don't know, right? Maybe from a psychological or emotional point of view. I don't quite know yet.
Yeah, yeah. I think that those are very astute observations. I also think that there's just this need for. I'm seeing more and more, especially sort of like smaller businesses, right? Who are, whether you're a startup or whether you're just sort of a classic mom and pop agency or what have you. People want to take their teams places for offsites, especially if you have remote teams. Obviously, you've seen like this massive like return to work happen. I still think at the sort of like small to medium sized businesses, like many of them were able to explode in very positive ways during COVID because obviously of the ability to recruit and employ workers from a myriad of places. And I think that for large companies, obviously we're seeing more pressure to get back into the office. I don't think that we're seeing that same trend for smaller and medium sized companies. And yet because of their dispersion as teams, like they do want opportunities to bring these folks together. Oftentimes for these small companies, getting into let's just say like a incredible spot in like an A grade city, right, might be difficult, right, to secure co-working space, a really cool hotel for people to stay in as well. And so they're kind of choosing like maybe like A minus, B plus, B sort of cities instead, that are a little bit more affordable to bring a team from a myriad of places to. So you obviously need a good airport, but I think what these folks need is not too unlike Adam Newman's whole like co-living concept. I think he called it We Live back in the day, right? It never like really took off, obviously, but this idea of shared communal workspaces still having all the same aesthetic and beauty and vibe that like a boutique hotel has. I think that sort of like chain of properties, or that category of properties that could host, let's say, a team of 30 comfortably, where everyone's got like their own room, but there are enough communal spaces. That gap, that seems to be a gap from my perspective. I recognize, right, the margins are probably hard. Like it's probably hard to execute that at any sort of like meaningful scale. But I think boutique properties and boutique brand developers are sort of in this really unique opportunity to be sort of pioneers in this space if they feel so called to build something like this, because I really do think that there's a need.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. And that goes back to the question, what do you want? Do you want to make a quick buck?
Yeah.
You want to have a long-term pure profitability, then maybe jump into another type of hotel investment. I had a conversation with one of the head of an investment company who owns 76 hotels last week. And, their properties are 200 rooms and up. It's 4 stars, upper upscale, big restaurants, and they do fine, right? They make lots of money. I don't think they're in love with their properties, right? But that's their choice. And I think if you have an investor who says, or a fund or whatever, who says, I really want to make a difference and I want to create something and I really put my my vision and my soul into, there's opportunity for sure. But I think it's also a question of, who's going to build this? And I think we have a lot of generalists nowadays. And I went to the butcher the other day, and I don't eat a lot of meat, and I needed a piece of meat. And there's 10 people before me, and there were 6 guys that happened to be all male butchers, and they were all in conversation with guests, and were talking about the piece of meat and recipes, and then everybody who left got a piece of sausage, which is something very nostalgic, but that's what we got at the butcher when there were only butchers when I grew up. And I thought, what expertise these guys have and how much joy they have. And I would go back. And that goes for the baker too. And that also goes for the people who sell linen and cushion covers and bed linen and towels. All these people had trades, and they were experts in what they did, and they knew their trade. They maybe didn't know anything, the butcher didn't know anything about the bakery, but the bakery knew nothing about the butcher, but that didn't matter because each had their own place. Right now we've got big supermarkets, right? And there's people filling shelves. Most cashiers are gone. And I understand why, it's convenience, right? Because it's faster, it's more economical. I get all that. But a similar thing I think has happened in hotel business. We had mom and pop hotels, and they stood for something, and it was a family business, and the food was grandma's recipes, and they were experts at what they did. And all of a sudden, we let big hotels, small hotels be built by generalists, right? A bit like the supermarket analogy. And then we ask people, and we wonder why people are not connected. Well, I think there's a you can't have it all, right? In this format. So I think there's a huge opportunity there for people who really, like I said, who have a passion and a soul searching project. Those who have a pot of cash to really create something unique. But then, it might not be the same GOP as the hotel next door, but that then shouldn't matter because it's done from a very different reasoning.
Well, and actually, Edwin, I'd love your thoughts on this, because I know so many people who are listening to this conversation right now, right, who are aspiring hospitality entrepreneurs. Maybe they've started in the short-term rental space, and now they're interested in sort of getting into boutique hotels. Maybe they've bought land and built this, stunning micro resort with 4 to 6 units, but now they want to scale a little bit bigger. And what I get questions from listeners in my email all the time, saying like, "Hey, I've piloted this one thing," or like, "I have the land, I've got the concepts, I've got the designs, like I'm ready to go. I'm going to throw my heart and soul into this. Do you know any investors who would invest in something like this?" And so that, like, what I think is challenging, right, is I think that there is this desire from many people that is correlated and maybe close to even identical of sort of like your vision and what we've been hashing out today. I think the challenge is for many of the people with the soul and the heart to go and execute something like this, they don't necessarily have the pockets. And finding the right investors to come on board with them to help execute, like, that seems to be the biggest friction point right now I think it's still, quite frankly, because this concept of more boutique experiential hospitality, it's certainly not new, right? That this has been around, better than anyone. But I think to maybe sort of like the common investor or more contemporary investors, it is kind of having a renaissance of sorts. It's still hard to know, right? Somebody who bought a bunch of land in COVID and built 10 beautiful luxury tree houses that all go for $800 a night, is that like a one-off miracle thing, or is that actually like, is there actually a trend here that's worth paying attention to? And I think from an investor's perspective, it might still be a little bit early. What do you think about that? Like, how do you help have conversations with investors to get them excited about these sorts of projects?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of people like family offices. I mean, you're not talking about institutional investors, right? Because for these kind of investments, you probably need a family office or a bunch of friends who've done really well. I think I've advised a lot of people is first look in your own surroundings. Very simple. Who's got the cash, right? And then there needs to be some sort of connect. Because you may have a great idea, but you don't have the money, and people who have the money may not have the great ideas. Or when we started off, people have egos, or they think they can do better, and that's always it's fine, but it's a dangerous starting point, no? But there's so many ways people can connect nowadays on this, I always advise people, if you go into bed with somebody from an investment point of view, do it with somebody you really like, because that relationship is so crucial, right? So that's I think first. Second, there is a lot of money out there, and I think the fear sometimes of starting a hospitality business is that it's so labor intensive, and is that it's an unknown for so many people, right? It's much easier to do a villa or a car park or an office building and sell that again than to have an exit strategy in a hotel in 5 or 10 years, because there's a lot more work that needs to be done in that meantime. So if you get the passion and the vision and that together with somebody else who says, I'm a bit done with my investments, help me out here, and there's a trust bond that's formed, I think there's, at least I've seen, lots of good come out of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 100%. 100%. And
And I
I
think
think, you know,
so.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
And I think the other thing is what we're seeing at the moment is, the word that's come up often, unique experiences, right? Everybody's sort of jumping on that as well. But what really in this business is unique? How long is it unique for?
Mm.
There's take the micro resort. I mean, there's and you've had some really great people on who've done phenomenally well. I mean, praise them for coming up with some great concepts, right? And you see those things already now being copied. So how unique is that still? And what does unique do to a human being? I mean, if I'm attracted to something that's unique, I think of something that I want to experience once. But
Mm.
that's a bad business model, right? If that's your
Yeah.
if that's your definition of unique, you have a unique experience. So that's often is a one off. At least that's my interpretation of it. So if you build this right, and if you do 2 rooms and there's 7 billion, 8 billion people in the world, I forgot how many there is, then you're fine. But if you do this on scale, you want people to repeat. At least in my hospitality world, I want people to repeat. It's better,
Yeah.
right? It's cheaper from a marketing perspective, but I think it also gives much more joy. Um, so I think the drawback with that sometimes is to say, what are you going to invest your money in? Will it hold the test of time? Right, that's a huge box for me when you're looking at things to invest, because we can all come up with fantastic, crazy ideas, but in a year's time, when it's gone global and it's gone viral, are people still going to be attracted to it? And if yes, great, go for it, because we need more fun, right? In this world, we need more fantastic, fun, crazy, wild experiences. There was somebody who I thought was very clever. I think it's a very small company in Holland. They're called Cabiner, and they have cabins where you need to bring your own sleeping bag, your own sheets, your own everything, and you need to hike up to them 4 or 5 kilometers. And you think, and they're full, And you need to do your
Yeah,
own
of course.
cleaning. You do everything yourself, and they're full.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
clever is that, right? That's probably a really cheap piece of land because there's no road. So, it wasn't sellable. You probably got real great planning permission quickly because, nobody's going to invest in infrastructure.
Yeah.
But we bought into it, and we're going to spend our weekend there on 20, 25 square meters, or 30 square feet, or whatever it is. So, but those concepts, I think, will stand the test of time because we'll all still want to do that. And if you have 2 or 3 or 4 of those, then there'll be enough audience. Is what I think my message is. There'll be enough audience to keep filling them. So
Yeah.
I think there's a differentiation you need to have on size versus how unique you want to be.
Yeah. And maybe an interesting sort of thought experiment too is, and this isn't like a perfect analogy by any means, but right, I think about like Disneyland, for instance, right? And there are people that go to Disneyland every single year. There are people that go to Disneyland multiple times a year. And yes, right, the park is always getting better. They're always adding like, a new ride, or, a new hotel or whatever it is. So there's certainly sort of like improvements happening, but like the core sort of experience of Disneyland, right, is not going to be dramatically different year over year. And yet people continue to return, right? Again, sometimes multiple times a year. And so like, what is it about it that I mean, obviously they're creating memories, but I know people that literally like they go to Disneyland every year, and they go and they stay in the same hotel that they stayed in because like the first time they had such a great experience, and they don't want to try any of the other 7 hotels or 8 hotels or whatever it is, right, like, that they have now. And so I think maybe a question for hospitality operators who want to craft these unique experiences to ask themselves is like, okay, if the actual unit type can't be different year over year, or what about the experience that you're delivering to guests can change enough to have that kind of Disneyland effect of like anticipating something maybe a little bit different while also still retaining everything that you loved about your first experience
No.
there, right? And that balance again is incredibly hard to do, but maybe that's a helpful thought experiment for some. I don't know.
Yeah, but maybe it doesn't have to change, right? And maybe you just hit the right spot.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people talk about we need to have great food, we need to have community. There's all these buzzwords that everybody has, and everybody says that they have all these things already in their package, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But nobody's going to say I'm going to do bad food, right? Everybody has it in a mission to do good food or to deliver great service or to deliver intuitive service. So
Yeah.
everybody already does that. But why do you go back to the same restaurant,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, you talked about Disneyland. And you
Yeah.
say the experience might be different. I've gone to restaurants and haven't changed their menu in 20 years. Why do I go
Mm,
back, right? How does it make me feel? It's that perfect package of emotions, right? From
yeah.
walking into it and there's a lot of there's a lot of little details that make the difference. I was having a conversation with somebody 2 days ago about positionings of front desks when you walk into a restaurant or into a hotel, right?
Mm,
Are they at an angle? Are they straight? I walked into a massive hotel. I'm in Barcelona at the moment. Last week, and a revolving door, which is already kind of hard. It's not very inviting. And there's two guys, beautiful black uniforms, standing outside, and they had a rope and stanchion outside. And I felt
mm,
like I was going to a club, and I didn't want to go
mm.
in, right? So it's all these little details that make a difference. And I think the great restaurants, and probably your example of Disney is that you are welcomed in, a bit like
Yeah.
how mom and pop used to run their hotel. And Disney is just great for creating those emotions. Obviously, it helps when your kids say, "I want to go back," right? Because it's often not the parents who only drive that experience. Some inner child still drive this. I could do the same, but but it's really walking into places like this and saying it just made me feel good. I felt comfortable. I was looked after. I was joyful. I think
Yeah.
that's another thing in our business. Um, we work in a business where people pay to have fun.
Mm,
You think about that.
mm,
How many
mm,
businesses are there where people pay to be joyful, where we
mm.
get paid to make moments of happiness? It's mind blowing if you think about this, right?
Yeah.
What a
Yeah.
great business, what a great industry to be in. And yeah, then there's all the other stuff and all the drama behind it. But the essence is creating great memories and creating joyful moments and creating happiness. And also, if we mess up, nothing's really going to happen, right? You might have to cough
Yeah.
and things, but no war is going to break out. Nobody's going to invade our country if we mess up. It's going to cost you a bit of money, but that's fine too, and people get that. So back to your question, I think these kind of places sometimes you don't need to change anything
Mm,
because it's how I feel. I feel safe with you. I feel good with you. You've created that moment of a joy. I really was up for a Mickey Mouse dance and a ride that got my heart pumping. And I know you do it really well, so I trust you. Right?
mm,
That trust
mm.
factor is another big one, obviously, in our business. I think I
Yeah.
think there's a lot to be said for those things. And sometimes when something really works, don't change it. I mean, how many restaurants have failed horribly when they took off their best-selling dishes
Yeah.
because they needed a change, and it was a
Yeah.
revolution. Don't do it. Don't touch it. What works really well, don't change it. People love it for a reason, and they come back to you for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so well said. So well said. Oh, and when you're full of great stories and analogies, and I could listen to you talk all day, but we should wrap to respect your time. But I want to hear just as we prepare to sign off here. Tell us a little bit about kind of if folks want to work with you, if they're, we do have a lot of folks who are interested in building their own hotel brands or building their own micro resorts, or they've launched a couple of short-term rentals they've listed on Airbnb that are super beautiful and they've gone, mega viral on Instagram. And now they're saying, okay, I want to be a hospitality entrepreneur. Like, what's next? Like, how do you work with people? Are you
Sure.
open to working with new people? Just tell folks a little bit about
No,
how.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've been in hospitality operations for 30 years. So this is a pretty new endeavor of mine, and I've worked with some fantastic clients. But I think the great thing is I've got 30 years of, like I said, mistakes and all the other stuff that I can put back into somebody's project to make sure that we can save time and money. And take away the headaches of all the things that come with these projects. No, but I have a website, kramerhospitality.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Edwin Kramer. And what I really enjoy is working with people, and it could be 2, 3, 4, 5 hours or a day, where they say, "I've got an idea." And often,
Yeah.
when you then talk to a hospitality professional who's seen a lot, and you ask the right questions, I often see that people base their idea on something they may want to replicate from somewhere else. I think the people I've spoken to so far, it's been helpful to say, well, what do you really want? And is that going to work? Is that going to work into something that can be realistic? So that's one thing. I also love taking businesses right from the conceptualization to construction phase. I did that recently with a hotel in Ibiza, 300 rooms. In the beginning, we thought we could still renovate, but it was a fantastic couple, an ownership couple, who knew they needed assistance. Anyway, long story short, we're building now a brand new resort there, 300 rooms, including all the
Wow.
amenities. And my assist in their process was there with assisting the developer and owner with the architect meeting, the designer meeting, anticipating what things are going to happen in the next couple of weeks, because these things are all processes, so that a developer and an owner really can sit at the table with an investor and with an architect and with a designer and developer, and really sit at the table and be part of that conversation. And then I also have helped and supported investors with simple things like timelines and sort of playbooks for the next phases in their project. And sometimes you need that right at the beginning, sometimes in the middle, sometimes through an entire project, and sometimes it's just good to have a couple of days to see how you're on track and where you could save some time and could save some money, and where you could take away some of that headache that is bound to happen if you're not an expert in this field.
Well, I think that you have certainly shared your expertise with us over the course of this conversation. I have learned a lot from you. Super impressed by the incredible brands that you've worked with, your own projects, and congratulations on this next exciting chapter. I'm pumped for you. And hey, I will, when I make it and when I've got my money one day, I will be calling you to help me buy my own hotel, because I definitely have aspirations of doing something like that one day myself. But thank you so much for your time, Edwin. For folks
Thank
who are,
you. And
yes.
I don't think we say it enough. But what you do with Journey is phenomenal. I
Oh,
think
thank you.
there's a, because we talked a lot about brands today, but there's a huge platform now and coming up with for all these individual hotel owners that didn't have that voice, or didn't have that outreach, or didn't have that support. So I think it's phenomenal. I think there's a huge opportunity also for people to get more comfortable and more. It's a safer bet, I think, to step into this realm of hospitality ownership
Yeah.
now than it was
Yeah.
before. So I appreciate that.
Of course, of course. And for listeners, I'll have links to Edwin's LinkedIn as well as his website in the show notes below. So if you're interested in connecting, just scroll into the show notes and you will find all of the appropriate links. Edwin, thanks so much for your time, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us for this episode of Behind the Stays. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram at Behind the Stays or send me an email at zach@joinjourney.com. If this is your first time tuning in, it's a pleasure to have you and we hope to have you back again soon. But if you've been a listener for a while, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd subscribe to the show if you aren't already, and then leave us a rating and review of the show wherever you're streaming this podcast. Oh, and if you know a hotelier or a hospitality entrepreneur that's building something new and novel, I invite you to introduce them to me so that my team and I can discuss bringing them on the show. Again, you can just shoot me an email at zach@joinjourney.com or a DM on Instagram. Behind the Scenes is brought to you by Journey, a next-generation loyalty program built for the modern traveler. We're looking to onboard new boutique hotels, unique stays, and the top vacation rental management companies onto our platform every day. If you're a hospitality entrepreneur who has a stay or a collection of stays with soul, we'd love for you to apply to join our alliance at joinjourney.com/alliance. Again, that's joinjourney.com/alliance. Thanks for being here, y'all. We will see you next time.